Chicago staying in it. Natasha Cloud. And right before the break, this was the scene inside Wintrust Arena after Natasha Cloud got that bucket. She wanted her
league. They don't get it. They just don't get it. They wonder why their league isn't respected. They wonder why no one takes this toxic turd seriously. Somehow, the lovely Sophie Cunningham is being blamed for Natasha Cloud's emotional meltdown last night.
Enes Kanter believed he was simply showing support for Sophie Cunningham, but what happened next turned a WNBA game into a major controversy. Natasha Cloud fired back. Kanter quickly became involved in a heated exchange. And then, right in the middle of the game, security reportedly had to intervene. But what really happened behind the scenes? And why did Kanter's reaction cause the situation to escalate even further?
What happened tonight? Good question. So I was literally out there. I mean, obviously I'm a huge fan of basketball, a huge fan of third quarter. And Sophie Cunningham shot a three. And I put my hands up to celebrate, right? Literally a couple position later, Natasha came back and started screaming and yelling and said, "She's not going to sleep with you." And I was like, I am not trying to sleep with her. I'm just here to protect women and support.
Controversial shirt. The stage was already set for tension inside the arena.
Although no one could have expected the situation to escalate so quickly, it soon turned into a confrontation involving Natasha Cloud and arena security.
Of course, these players are triggered because they want, by God, men to be allowed to compete in women's sports. They literally want to destroy their own sport. Enes Kanter and Royce White are trying to make a point because the WNBA refuses to define clearly what a woman is. He was wearing a shirt. Woman, noun, adult, human, female. He wore that shirt. This was Natasha Cloud going at Enes Kanter.
What he likely never expected was for a WNBA player to walk straight toward him during the third quarter, point directly at him, exchange heated words, and create such a chaotic scene that security ultimately escorted the former NBA center out of the arena.
Williamson, also known as Sergeant Simp. This dude seems to be desperate for the attention of WNBA players. He is constantly shooting his shot on Twitter, hoping to be noticed by the ladies. Of course, like most WNBA players, Chris Williamson misses 100% of the shots that he takes. According to the sergeant, Sophie Cunningham is so gross. Ew! Her irrational fear of men wanting to borrow her thongs has been detrimental to our precious league.
And then, because modern sports can turn a single basketball game into a political debate, social media battle, courtroom-style argument, and reality TV reunion all at once, Enes Kanter Freedom quickly had a response. He claimed that he had been removed from the arena simply for supporting women.
Cloud found some way to make last night's game all about her. As the Chicago Sky are getting crushed in the third quarter, in the fourth quarter, Natasha Cloud decides to crash out on a fan courtside. That fan was wearing a shirt that said "woman" on it, and Natasha Cloud couldn't bear the sight. All the horror. So Natasha Cloud starts approaching this, and this was a woman sitting courtside. Natasha Cloud starts approaching this female sitting courtside and starts going off, screaming at them, cursing at them, yelling at them. And somehow this female fan is the one that gets kicked out.
But Natasha Cloud appeared to view the situation in a completely different way. And caught somewhere in the middle of the growing chaos was Sophie Cunningham, whose previous comments about transgender participation in women's sports had already placed her at the center of a major national debate long before Kanter ever took his courtside seat. So what really happened when Enes Kanter Freedom and Natasha Cloud crossed paths during the Indiana Fever and Chicago Sky game? What did Kanter claim happened before security escorted him from the arena? And why did Cloud's teammates immediately step up in support of her? Because once you move beyond the shouting, pointing, and eventual security escort, the entire story becomes even more unusual. The game itself was already packed with enough drama to keep basketball fans talking. Indiana defeated Chicago 113-90, with Caitlin Clark putting up 37 points and 10 assists while connecting on 8 three-pointers, while Kelsey Mitchell contributed another 30 points. It was the type of dominant performance that should have completely controlled the conversation after the final buzzer, especially after the Fever's explosive second half and Chicago being eliminated from playoff contention. Instead, one of the night's biggest talking points centered on a former NBA center sitting near the baseline. That former NBA center was Enes Kanter. Kanter had arrived at Chicago's Wintrust Arena wearing a black shirt displaying the words, "Woman, now an adult human female." The message was clearly intentional, as was his decision to attend the Fever game.
Is going about this in a weird way, but he's actually doing a service to women to protect women. And the audacity of people going against him to protect y'all is nuts to me. Natasha Cloud ran up to Enes Kanter in the middle of the third quarter because he had a shirt on that said "woman." Now, like, he's in support of women, for women.
For weeks, the WNBA had been caught in an intense public debate over transgender athlete eligibility after Sophie Cunningham openly expressed her belief that biological males should not compete in women's sports. Cunningham later clarified that her position was about protecting women's sports rather than hostility toward transgender people, but her comments still sparked strong backlash as well as support. The controversy became even more complicated when Enes Kanter and former NBA player Royce White publicly announced themselves as candidates for the 2027 WNBA draft, framing the move as a challenge to what they considered unclear eligibility rules. At the time, the league stated that there were no immediate eligibility issues affecting the WNBA, and there was no known transgender woman currently playing in the league. So when Kanter walked into Wintrust Arena, he was not simply another celebrity sitting courtside hoping to catch the camera's attention. He arrived carrying an existing controversy with him, and apparently that controversy came with a very good seat. According to the sequence described in multiple reports, the confrontation erupted late in the third quarter after Natasha Cloud scored inside with 1:22 remaining. A timeout was then called. Cloud celebrated with teammate Aisha Coulibaly, and moments later she turned toward Kanter's position along the baseline.
Last night's incident involving Natasha Cloud and Enes Kanter. He showed up last night to the Chicago Sky Fever game to support Sophie Cunningham and the Protect Women's Sports movement. He hung out with the rally outside. Damn near got attacked by Chicago Sky fans out there. Of course, they were belligerent and very vulgar, as was Natasha Cloud. And this has gotten deeper and deeper.
What happened next immediately changed the mood inside the arena. Cloud walked toward Kanter, shouting and pointing in his direction. Kanter stood up with his arms extended and moved toward the edge of the court, while security and several Chicago players stepped between the two. He was then escorted away from his courtside seat. Just like that, what had started as a regular season basketball game suddenly had an entirely different storyline. Natasha Cloud remained in uniform, visibly fired up by the action on the court, while Enes Kanter stood along the baseline after publicly showing support for Sophie Cunningham and her position in the debate surrounding women's sports. The WNBA schedule can tell fans who is playing, where the game is being held, and when the opening tip is scheduled, but it usually does not come with a warning that a former NBA center could suddenly become one of the biggest stories before the fourth quarter even begins. Yet that was exactly what happened, because once Kanter was removed from the arena, the basketball game became only one part of a much larger conversation. Kanter quickly took his argument to social media, claiming that he had been kicked out of a WNBA game for supporting women. He later offered a more detailed version of events, explaining that the confrontation began after Sophie Cunningham hit a three-pointer and he celebrated her basket. According to Kanter, Natasha Cloud then approached him and began shouting, leading to an increasingly heated exchange before security ultimately stepped in and removed him from the arena.
Let me get this straight. Natasha Cloud, within the span of a week, uses a homophobic slur. Then she goes back and forth with a fan courtside, gets the fan kicked out, and no punishment for Natasha Cloud. Folks, in any other league, if you use a homophobic slur during a press conference, you're getting fined, at worst, suspended. Folks, in any other league, if you're screaming at a fan courtside, especially an innocent female fan, if you're screaming at that person courtside, there's going to be some punishment coming down from the...
That, of course, is Kanter's account of how the incident unfolded, and it is important to separate his personal version from what can actually be confirmed through available footage and major reports. The video clearly shows Cloud approaching Kanter during a timeout, after which the two exchanged words before Kanter stood up and moved toward the court. As the situation grew more tense, players and security personnel stepped in, and Kanter was eventually escorted away from his courtside seat. However, Kanter's response did not end once he left the building. His removal quickly became another major talking point, particularly among supporters who believed he had been removed simply for expressing his opinion. His critics, however, viewed the incident very differently. From their perspective, Kanter had intentionally placed himself inside a WNBA game while wearing a message tied to an already explosive cultural debate, making it difficult to separate his appearance from the controversy that followed. They argued that his presence was not merely an act of quiet support, but part of a broader political statement that was almost certain to attract attention and potentially trigger a reaction. That is where the story becomes far more complicated than a simple argument over who spoke first. The exact same incident can appear completely different depending on which side of the controversy someone already stands on.
I don't get that. And I see a lot of people coming out about what Enes Kanter is doing. Like, there's a lot of black men, oh, you treating our women. He's actually on your side, you morons. You are fighting against what he's trying to protect that y'all want protected. Women playing against women in women's sports. There's no hate towards trans women. Like, this has been stated numerous times, and it started with the Sophie Cunningham.
Kanter views himself as standing up for women's sports while supporting Sophie Cunningham after she expressed a position that sparked significant backlash. Cloud and many of Kanter's critics, meanwhile, see his actions as part of a larger attempt to bring a deeply divisive political and cultural debate directly into a professional basketball arena. Chicago Sky head coach Tyler Marsh strongly supported Cloud following the incident, making it clear that the organization stood behind her. He praised her willingness to defend her teammates and stand up for people she believes deserve protection, while also emphasizing that fans attending WNBA games should be there to enjoy the competition and respect the athletes on the court. That response highlighted something important about the controversy, because this situation was never likely to end quietly once Kanter left the arena. Some argued that Kanter had been removed simply for supporting Sophie Cunningham and expressing his belief that women's sports should be reserved for biological women. Others maintained that Kanter was not merely an innocent spectator caught in an unexpected confrontation, but someone who had deliberately placed himself at the center of a political demonstration and therefore should not have been surprised when his presence created controversy. Meanwhile, there was an awkward and almost ironic reality at the heart of the entire situation. Sophie Cunningham, whose earlier comments helped fuel the debate surrounding Kanter's appearance, was simply doing what she came to the arena to do: play basketball.
Saw this when I was watching the game live. I only saw it from Natasha Cloud's point of view, like the camera that was following her, and I was nervous. I was like, oh no, like who is she getting into it with on the Indiana Fever? Like there's bad blood between these two teams, like what happened? And then the camera pans and she's going off on Enes Kanter, who was sitting courtside. Now when she starts walking towards him and kind of telling him off, he stands up, puts his arms out, and starts walking onto the court. Like he takes a step onto the court. That was the reason he was ejected. I'm seeing so many people saying like, oh, he shouldn't have been ejected. Like, what did he do wrong? He walked onto the court. That's what he did wrong. Like that is that is basic courtside.
She did not approach Natasha Cloud looking to start an argument, nor did she stop the game to address anyone about the controversy. She also did not need a security escort or become directly involved in the confrontation that unfolded near the baseline. She had simply made a three-pointer, and according to Kanter's account, His celebration of that basket became part of the sequence that eventually sparked the confrontation. Sophie Cunningham hits a shot. Enes Kanter celebrates from courtside. Natasha Cloud reacts to something involving his presence or actions, and suddenly a basketball game is interrupted by a confrontation that requires security to step in. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark had delivered the kind of performance that would normally dominate the post-game conversation without much competition. Her 37 points and 10 assists should have been an obvious headline, especially after she knocked down 8 three-pointers during Indiana's victory. Yet after the game, Clark said she had not seen the confrontation between Kanter and Cloud, while Lexi Hull also indicated that Kanter had not said anything to the Fever players during the game.